Hello. Today's topic is securing the Apicurio Service Registry UI and API, Part 1. First, a few words on Apicurio Service Registry. A registry is just a server that stores specific sets of artifacts or files. Here are some examples of the files that you can store: OpenAPI spec, Apache Evo, the Schema, and so on and so forth. It also allows you to add, update, and remove the artifacts, either using the user interface provided by the Apicurio Service Registry or by using a REST API. It can also use global rules to ensure that content is valid and enforce a compatibility level when updating an artifact. However, today I'm not going to tell you how you're going to use the Apicurio Service Registry. Rather, I'm going to tell you how you can actually secure the service registry, for example, using HTTPS and providing authentication and authorization. Now, why am I giving this talk? Because when I'm doing my research, I find that information is really hard to combine related to how to secure the Apicurio Service Registry. And another reason I'm doing this is I want to illustrate to you how you can use Red Hat Single Sign-On or Keycloak to provide identity and access management. Some of our customers are using Azure Active Directory for authentication, so I'm going to show you how you can use Azure Active Directory as an identity provider for SSO. And then in the next part, I'm going to show you how you can actually use Apicurio Service Registry as a drop-in replacement for Confluent's Schema registry. And then I'm going to show you a couple of Quarkus application using Kafka and the Schema registry to validate produce messages. Come back to part 1's objective. The main objectives are telling you how you can use RHSSO, single sign-on, as both the service provider and the identity provider, meaning that it does everything. Right? You put all the user information and credentials and the role that your users are going to have in single sign-on. That means you can use whatever credentials that you have in SSO to log in and use the user interface. An alternate way to actually authenticate is by using the Azure Active Directory as an identity provider. And then, of course, you also have to configure the registry. I'm not going to show you how you're going to install all this in this particular demo, but all the information you can find in the GitHub repository, which I put a link next to the video. Now, the environment I'm using is this. I'm using OpenShift 4.7.18, AMQ Streams Operator 2.0.0, Single Sign-On 7.4.9, and the Service Registry Operator 2.0.4. This is what I'm going to demo. I'm using a browser to access the Apicurio user interface. And when I do this, it gets redirected to Keycloak. So depending on which particular authentication you're going to use a Keycloak as both the service provider and the identity provider, then you just use the Keycloak's user and credential to log in. Or you can use the Azure Active Directory to log in. If you're going to do that, you get redirected to the Azure Active Directory login page. Once you input your credentials, you'll be redirected back to the Apicurio user interface. Registry login screen looks like after I've configured SSO and also configured Azure AD as IDP for SSO. So you can log in at this stage either by logging in using the users you configured in SSO, or you can just click on this Azure AD button. When you do that, you'll be redirected to the Microsoft login screen. And I'm using this particular login ID. So I log in, stay logged in, why not? Send code. Now I'm in. So depending on the role I have in the Microsoft AD account, my group will be mapped to one of the roles in the registry, and in this case, I'm assigned the SR admin role. In that role, I can actually do a lot of things, like including deleting a message, deleting an artifact. Let's delete everything. And then upload an artifact. Browse. Let's upload an API, open API specification. You can either put in the group name and the ID of the artifact, or just leave them blank and then let registry decide on it. Now you can look at the documentation, what it is. So this is the open API, and this is the content of that specification. Please note that the objective of this particular demo is not to show you how to use the service registry. The objective is to show you how to configure authentication and authorization using SSO and also using the Azure Active Directory as the IDP. And that's why I'm not going to show you all the other features of the service registry. The next thing I'm going to show you is how you configure SSO to do all this stuff. What I'm going to show you now is how to set up single sign-on to integrate with the Apicurio Registry UI. And then I'm going to come back and tell you how to integrate the Azure Active Directory as the IDP for your Apicurio Registry. Now, first of all, let us log into single sign-on. If you haven't actually created a realm for SSO for your registry application, so I suggest you to create one. Don't use the master realm. Create a realm called registry. The next thing you want to do is you want to create a client. Click create, and for my case, I created one called the service registry. Let's have a look at what it contains. First of all, I give it a name, client's ID, service registry, and it's enabled. The important things to set up is the client protocol, which is OpenID Connect. And then the access type is public. Make sure the centerfold is enabled and the direct access grant enabled. And this is root URL for your registry. And then you also need to set the registry, the wedded redirect URL. Basically, it's everything under your root URL. And that's it. That's all you need to do for the client. Next, you want to do is create the roles and then the user so that you can log in from the registry UI. By default, the Apicurio Service Registry have 3 different roles. One is called SR-admin, SR-developer, and SR-read-only. So when you log in here, you won't see these 3. So what you need to do is to add a role. Since I already defined one, so I'll just click on it and to let you show what it is. So all it does is, all you need to do is give it a name, right? And then after you created these 3 different roles, admin, developer, and read-only, what the next thing you're going to do is to create a user for these roles. Now let us have a look at the users that I've created. You will see that I created one called the admin, and one called the developer, and one called the read-only. So obviously you don't have those 3 different users. So what you need to do is click on the add user. Since I already have it defined, I just click on this one and show you what it is. So the username, the important thing here is you need to set up the credential for it. So normally what you do is you set the temporary to off, and then you give it a password and the password confirmation so that when the user logs in, it does not ask it to change its password. If you leave the temporary on, then the first time the user logs in, it will ask him or her to change the password. The important thing is this one, the role mapping. Right. Before you do that, you see these 3 things in here: developer, read-only, and admin. Since I'm creating this for admin, so I actually selected that admin and add it to the assigned roles. And that is for the admin user. Then you do the same for the developer. Obviously, for the developer, the role mapping is you assign the developer role to it. And as for the read-only, it is the read-only role. Now that is all you need to do on the SSO side, just to allow the registry to log in using the login screen, to log in using one of the 3 users, like an admin, developer, and read-only. But you still have to configure your service registry to honor all these settings. So what you need to do is select the project where you're running your service registry here, and then select the deployment. Click on the environment. You see there are a number of options or environments I have to enable. I have it documented in the description below. First of all, the Java options. So I'll talk about it a little bit more later. So it should be in the YAML file that I provided. Right. Next thing is you have to set the registry data source. So you have 3 options. You can either use a Postgres database for persistence, or you can use a Kafka, or you can use the infinite span or data grid. I chose to use the registry, so I give the data source, which is actually the JDBC URL for it. And the registry data source username is Postgres. Let's log in for the Postgres database. And the data source password is also Postgres. The Quarkus profile is production, and auth enable, authentication enable is set to true. And the clear code URL is this one here, the clear code /auth. So basically what this does is when you first access the UI will make use of this key code URL to redirect it to key code, so that key code can do the authentication, and then it redirect it back to your registry UI. And you can see that I also included the key code realm, which is registry, and the key code client ID, which is registry API, which is the name of the client, SSO client I created earlier. And also you need to have the role-based authentication and enable variable set to true. And once you save it, it will restart the registry to honor all these settings. You can now log in from the Service Registry UI by using one of the three users: admin, developer, and read-only. Let us configure Azure AD as an IDP and then integrate it with single sign-on. Now you need to get to your portal, Azure portal. So the first thing you want to do is define the groups. Remember, we have three different roles in the service registry. One is the SR admin, SR developer, and SR read only. We need to create similar kind of groups in Azure and then assign the group, whichever it is, to user, so that when the user log in using Azure AD, the group that the user belongs to can be mapped into a particular role in SSO. So let's first of all define the groups. Click on Groups. And you see that I have actually defined three different groups: registry admin, registry dev, and registry read only. Notice that the group names don't have to be exactly the same as the ones in the roles names in the SSO, as long as you know what it means. Like for registry admin is for administration, dev is for developers, and read only is for read only. Now let's have a look at the users. So you can create more users, but you can use your user or your only user in AD as well. So if you click on the user, click on the group, you see that I've been assigned the group registry admin. So that means when I log in using Azure AD, I get mapped into the SR admin role in the SSO. Once you've done that, get back to all services and click on Azure Active Directory and click on App Registration. You can see I've already defined SSO. If you haven't actually done it, you can click on the new registration and then give it a name, leave this unchanged, and then just click on Register. And then what you get is something like this one, SSO. If you click on this one, SSO, you also click on the redirect URIs. You can see that I have actually two redirected URIs. So normally you only have one. I have two because I was playing around with the SSO and I defined a second HTTPS or root for it. Oh, that's why I got two of them. For your case, if you haven't actually playing around with SSO and created an additional root for it, then you should only have one. Now, next thing is very important. Let's get back to SSO. You want to add a client secret. So you can see that I've actually added one, but if you haven't, what you need to do is click on this one here, give it a description, so whatever text you want, and then the expiration period. You can choose one of the following. So once you click on add, it will show you the secret value, but that only occurs once. You cannot retrieve it later, so save it when you see it. Let's click on the endpoint. Right, you can see there are lots of information in here. The important thing now is to select this one, OpenID Connect, metadata, click on the clipboard. So what this does is give you all the information regarding this particular app registration with all these OAuth endpoints, etc. defined. So what you can do is that you copy this particular document from your portal, and then you can import that into the SSO. Let me log in. Click on the identity provider. So I have already created the Azure AD integration, but if you haven't done it, you can just say add provider. And the next thing is very important. Choose OpenID Connect. And give it a name, like you don't have to name it OIDC. So basically what you're going to do is scroll down to the bottom, see this import from URL. So that is the document link we copied from Azure portal. So let's paste this in. Import. You can see that it populated the number of entries in there, save you typing all this and make typo mistakes. So I'm not going to save this because I just want to show you what it looks like once you've configured anything. Yeah, you notice that well, this has been previewed using that document from the Azure portal, and you have enabled, put to on, trust email on. The first login flow is the first broker login, and then you have authorization URL and so on and so forth. Right. The next thing is important, like mappers. Remember, when you sign in using Azure AD, you log in as a user in Azure AD, and your Azure AD have role. So in my case, I assigned the role registry admin, which is a role, a group defined in Azure. I want to map that particular group into a particular role which I've defined in SSO. Right, so you just click create, and what it will look like is this. You select the mapper type to claim to role, and then you type in the claim is groups. Remember, look at this claim value. That is just a string of number, and you want to map it to the role SR admin. So how do you get this number? So if you go back to this particular your portal, groups, you see that associated with each group there's an object ID, and this is that string of characters is the object ID that you want to copy over. So if you look at this one, something and in AD3, something and in AD3. So what it does is it's using a claim of two roles. So the claim is the groups from the login user, and then you want to map that particular claim value, which is the registry admin, to the SR admin role. So this is what it means. You see that I actually defined 3 of this to map the 3 different groups into 3 different roles in SSO. So you can see that for this particular group, I'm mapping this string to SR developer. If you look at this ending in 5DA, this is the dev registry developer. So once you've done that, you just save it, and then it will work. Now you have seen the demo. You have seen how I actually secure the registry UI by using single sign-on as both the service provider and also the identity provider. The alternate way to log in is by using RHSSO as the service provider and the Azure Active Directory as the identity provider, and also show you how you should configure the registry's environment variables. That concludes today's demo. Tune in the next time when I will be talking about how to secure the registry's RESTful API. Of course, you need to configure the RHSSO. And also, I'm going to show you a couple of Quarkus applications. One is a producer, one is a consumer. And those applications will be using the FO schema for the message. They will be using the schema registry to validate the data produced. So stay tuned, and in the meantime, stay safe. Thank you.